You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast with your ADHD coach and expert, Zena. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to Navigating Adult ADHD. I am so excited to be here with you, but I got to tell you, I'm doing something I haven't done before. I am currently in a body doubling session inside Adulting with ADHD, our group membership. And I did not know if you could body double and record a podcast at the same time on your computer. And it turns out you can. Look at that. I'm learning something. So right now I'm body doubling with some of our members while they are achieving different things. So if you're not familiar with body doubling, I think it's such a fantastic strategy for those of us with ADHD. And it is simply working alongside somebody else so that you have this kind of feeling of accountability, right? It's almost like, I love to do it in a cafe. I'll go to a cafe and I feel like everybody's watching me. They're not. They don't give a shit what I'm doing, but I'm so productive. It's so funny. But again, we come to this call, we talk about what we want to achieve in the next hour together, and then we get to work and we're all just, doing things. At the moment, I can see on my screen, I can see like a couple of the members working away. Some people have cameras on, some have them off. And then we come back 5 minutes before the hour and we talk about where we got to. Did we go off track? Did we get distracted? Did we achieve more than we thought, less than we thought, what have you? And it's like a great learning opportunity. Anyway, so fun. I just learned that I can record and do that. How cool. So, my friend, today I wanted to start with something that somebody said to me recently that stopped me in my tracks because I had not heard this in a long while. Somebody said, I really thought that ADHD was the naughty little boy at school in the back of the classroom who was always getting told off. And I went, yeah, me too. Like, that was what I used to think, like way before my diagnosis, before interacting with a lot of adults with ADHD. I really thought it was the naughty little boy at school, couldn't sit still, always getting in trouble. But nobody told me that it also looks like crying over a text message, or needing a recovery nap after you've replied to 3 emails because it's just drained your brain so much. Or avoiding something for 3 months that takes all of 7 minutes to accomplish. So today, my friend, we are going to go back to basics, all right? Back to basics, because sometimes that's exactly what we need. And because I wish that somebody had explained all of this to me in the way I'm going to explain it to you, back when I was newly diagnosed and trying to figure all of this out. Okay? So grab a coffee or like your 5th coffee for the day. No judgment. Do what you got to do. So what actually is ADHD? So ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. It is a neurodevelopmental condition, which is a very fancy clinical way of saying your brain is different. It developed differently. Now, it's not broken. It's not lazy. Your brain is literally wired differently. And that affects your attention, your emotions, your motivation, your behavior, and something called executive functioning, which we are absolutely going to dive into today. Okay? Now, here's the thing that really clicked for me when I first started learning about all of this properly, and I am going to credit this to ADHD expert Dr. Russell Barkley, because he says this better than anybody else, okay? ADHD is not a disorder of knowing what to do. It is a disorder of doing what you know. Okay, let me say that again and let it sink in. ADHD is not a disorder of knowing what to do. It is a disorder of doing what you know. Okay, this is not an intelligence issue. It is not a willpower issue. It's not a just try harder issue. God, if we had $1 for every time somebody had said just try harder to us, right? This is a regulation issue. So another way to think about it is ADHD isn't that you can't pay attention, okay? You have plenty of attention, plenty of it, going in lots of different places. It's that you can't always control what you pay attention to, or when, or for how long. Which is why you can hyper-focus on something for 6 hours straight and completely lose yourself in it. And then the next day, you can't even send a single email to save your life. Okay? My friend, that is not a character flaw. That is ADHD. So I love this metaphor. I think it's a metaphor. I always get confused between like metaphors, analogies, whatever. Okay, but let me paint you this picture. Most people's brains have a control panel. A nice functioning control panel with sliders and buttons and lights that let them adjust things like their attention, their motivation, their emotions, their impulse control. Now, ADHD is like, hey, you've got the control panel, it's there, it exists, but some of those sliders, they're a little bit loose. They get stuck sometimes. Some of those buttons are delayed. You press start task, nothing seems to happen for 45 minutes. You keep pressing it. You know, like when you walk in the elevator and you're like pressing the number over and over. Yeah, it's not happening any quicker. You press calm down and it just glitches. It's not that our control panel is not there. It's just that it's not always responding in the way in which we need it to. Okay? So, the symptoms of ADHD, my friend, they fall into three main categories. Number one, inattention. This is stuff like you walk into a room and you forget why you're in there. Right? You're in a meeting and somebody's talking and you're nodding along, and then you realize you've got absolutely no idea what they just said for the last 30 minutes. You meet somebody at a networking event, you get home and you have no idea what the names of those people were, just poof, vanished. You're reading the same page of a book for the third time because your brain just floated away somewhere else completely. Okay? Inattention, like a lack of attention. That's number one. Number two is hyperactivity. And look, for a lot of us who are, late diagnosed, especially women, this didn't always look the way that we expected, right? We often think of hyperactivity as like bouncing off the walls, like it's really, really obvious, can't sit still. But for a lot of us, this looks more like the internal restlessness, that like constant chatter in your brain, like a hyperactive brain, a brain that just will not switch off, right? Sitting in a meeting and your leg is like moving like a jackhammer underneath the table. Going on a holiday, not being able to relax, like thinking of yourself as that active relaxer. That's so me. That's what I call myself. I'm an active relaxer. I like to do stuff. But again, it's because your brain just will not stop. Okay? So that, my friends, hyperactivity. The third category is impulsivity. Okay? Got a story for this one, of course. So the other day I was working out in my gym. I work out with a small group of women. And one of the women is telling us something. I don't even know what she was saying, but she was mid-sentence telling us something right in the middle. And something just flew out of my mouth. I did not plan it. I didn't decide to say it. I swear it just came out of me. It just happened. And the look on her face, oh my God, immediately I wanted to stuff the words back into my mouth. I wanted to rewind. That is impulsivity. It's not rudeness. It's not that we don't care. It's that we just didn't get the pause button. We didn't get the memo. That step to stop and think before you act, just gone. Okay, so again, those three categories. And likely when you were diagnosed, you were told that your ADHD falls into one of those three categories. Okay, so there's predominantly inattentive, which is the daydreamers, the ones who flew under the radar at school. They were the ones described often as, would do well if she applied herself, right? Bright but scattered, that sort of thing. Then we've got predominantly hyperactive, right, which is the impulsive, hyperactive sort of a thing, which is more of the classic presentation of what people think of when they think of ADHD, right? The naughty little boy at school, can't sit still, all of that, okay? And then there is the combined type, which is both. It is a combination of being inattentive and hyperactive, okay? So that, my friends, that's me. That's where I sit, right? I'm in the middle. I'm a combination of both of those. So wherever you fall, welcome. Welcome to the team. Now, here's something that's really important that I really want to help you understand when it comes to ADHD. ADHD is a spectrum. And when I say spectrum, I want you to think about the color red. Okay? Imagine a dark red color, rich, vivid, intense. that might represent somebody with really severe symptoms, where ADHD is really significant, impacting every area of their life. Now I want you to imagine pale pink, right? The far opposite end of the dark red spectrum. It's barely there, right? That's somebody with really mild presentations. So we are all walking around with different shades of red. Now, this is why two people can have ADHD but have completely different experiences of it. So one person with ADHD might struggle enormously when it comes to keeping a tidy home. Another person with ADHD, their house is immaculate, right? They've built systems around it, or that particular challenge is not very pronounced for them. One person finds it's almost impossible to sit and read. Another person with ADHD reads constantly. They love to read, and their mind barely ever wanders, right? Same condition, but again, for every single symptom of ADHD, and there are so many, we each have different shades, okay? This is why it can be really, really confusing, and why so many of us spent years thinking, oh, but I can't have ADHD because I can do that, or I don't struggle with that, or I don't look like that. Makes sense, right? So let's talk about what's happening actually inside of the brain. This is the stuff that fascinates me. And this part genuinely helped me to really stop blaming myself, okay? So ADHD brains have lower levels of 3 key neurotransmitters, which are basically brain chemicals, okay? So the first one is dopamine. If you've been listening to the podcast a while, you know I love to talk about dopamine. It's so important for ADHD brains. So dopamine is like the motivation and reward chemical in the brain. It's the thing that makes your brain go, yes, let's do that. Yes, that feels good. Okay? ADHD brains are dopamine hungry. We've got a little less of it, so we want more of it. And we seek it through things that are novel. Things that are novel produce dopamine. Things that are interesting. Things that are urgent. That produces dopamine in our brain. Okay? Where some brains, I'm looking at my neurotypical friends, right? They get dopamine simply from just deciding to do something. But for us, that requires a lot more from our tank. And remember, our dopamine tank has a little less in it. Okay, so dopamine plays a huge role in ADHD brains. Okay, we got a little less of that chemical in the tank each day. The second one is norepinephrine, which, trust me, it's a very fancy way of saying adrenaline. It's norepinephrine when it's in the brain, when it's released into the body to be used. It's adrenaline, which is a word that you've probably heard, adrenaline. Okay, so this is something that helps us with focus, alertness, right, and regulating our attention, right, where we're paying our attention. So you can kind of think of it like your brain's steering system, steering you towards what you're doing. And the third brain chemical we got a little less of is serotonin. Now, again, this is one I love to talk about because this one's really important. It does a lot of really cool things. It supports mood, right? If you have a lot of low mood, it may be because of the serotonin, the lack of serotonin, right? If you struggle with sleep, which so many of us do, sometimes that can also come back to the serotonin. There are other ADHD factors in there for sure, but again, serotonin impacts mood, it impacts sleep, it impacts our emotional stability. So it's such a big player, okay? And again, I have loads of podcasts on this. There's so many things you can do naturally to help work with these brain chemicals and increase them and better understand them, etc. But if you want to think of it like this, your brain is a car. Okay, dopamine is the fuel, norepinephrine helps you to steer, and serotonin keeps the ride smooth. So the ADHD version, we got low fuel, we got inconsistent supply, very reactive system. Okay, so it means you're not broken, my friend. You're running on a different fuel system. And once you know that, you can really start to figure out how to work with that, how to better navigate and manage that. Okay? So we now need to talk, my friend, about executive functions, because I think this is a piece that makes everything click, okay? When people hear ADHD, they often think attention, lack of attention, distracted, can't focus, can't sit still. But underneath all of that is something called executive function. And this is where the real story lives. Okay. Executive function is your brain's management system. It is the collection of mental skills that help you to plan, to prioritize, to start a task, to stay on track, to manage your time, to regulate your emotions, meaning calm yourself down, right? And keep information in your head while you're using it. So if your brain is a company, executive function is the CEO of that company. And ADHD is like, your CEO is genuinely brilliant. Your CEO is full of ideas, sees the big picture, but they keep wandering off. In the middle of a meeting, they just walk out the room. They forget what the agenda was. They start 3 new meetings and somehow never get back to finishing that original one. Sounding familiar? Yeah. Now, this is important. There are different ways that experts will categorize executive functions, but the ones that seem to come up the most consistently in the ADHD literature and research are the ones that really impact us, are the 6 that I'm going to go through with you, okay? So number 1 is inhibition, which basically means impulse control, right? This is the ability to pause and think before you act. Right? To have a thought and not immediately act on it. To hear yourself and think, maybe I don't want to say that, right? Me at the gym. Maybe I don't want to say that out loud, or maybe I want to wait till she's finished talking. For ADHD brains, that pause button is delayed or just missing entirely. Okay, so again, it can show up as interrupting people mid-sentence, blurting things out, making impulsive decisions, spontaneous purchases that you did not plan, sending a message that immediately you wish you could unsend. So Dr. Russell Barkley actually argues that inhibition is the core deficit of ADHD, that all other executive function struggles really flow from this one. When your brain can't put the brakes on, everything sort of downstream gets affected too. So this is kind of like my brain sometimes skips the maybe don't say that step entirely, and it just goes straight to the saying. That's exactly what happened to me the other day at the gym. Right, the second executive function, number 2, is working memory. I like to think of this as your brain's mental sticky note. It's the ability to hold information in your mind while you're using it. So, for example, directions. And for ADHD brains, the sticky note is a budget sticky note. It's not a proper good 3M one. It's budget. It does not stick. It falls off the wall. So this might look like you walk into a room and completely forget why you are there. You follow instructions and then lose them halfway through, ending up in the wrong place. You read a paragraph, get to the end, and then have no idea what you just read. Right? You're in a meeting with somebody, having a lovely conversation. You get home and you completely forgot what their name was. Gosh, that happens to me all the time. I'm a shocker when it comes to remembering names. And it's not that you were not paying attention, it's that the information just did not stay. Okay? Again, it's like writing something really important on a sticky note, sticking it to the wall, and turning around after 10 seconds and you look back, it's just gone. So the third executive function is cognitive flexibility, right? So this is like shifting. This is the ability to switch between tasks, to shift your focus from one thing to another. So if you have difficulty task switching, right? To adapt when things change, to think about something in more than one way. That is cognitive flexibility, my friend. For ADHD brains, this one can be surprisingly tricky, which is ironic because we're also known for jumping between things constantly. Isn't that funny? But here's the nuance here. We can get hyper-focused and then struggle enormously to shift off something, right? Or we can get stuck in a pattern of thinking, right? Like replaying something over and over and over and find it really hard to see outside of that. And transitions, whether that's, switching tasks, ending something enjoyable, or adapting to unexpected changes, right? Those things can be genuinely dysregulating for us, like very, very difficult. So I don't multitask, I just poorly rotate between things I haven't finished. Something that somebody said to me the other day. Number 4, the fourth executive function here is planning and organizing. This is the ability to look at a task, okay, break it down into the steps that you need to do to achieve it, figure out what order those steps need to go in, and then actually execute the plan, like follow through on it, okay? For ADHD brains, this can feel like standing at the bottom of a mountain and having no idea where the path even starts. So it looks like not knowing where to begin. It looks like everything feels overwhelming because it's just one giant blob in front of you with no visible structure. It can look like having 50 ideas and no idea how to put them in an order into a sequence. Starting things but struggling to complete them. Creating systems and then never properly using them. Okay? That, my friends, is planning and organization, one of the executive functions that we struggle with. The fifth one is task initiation. All right, this is my personal nemesis. And I suspect many of you are like, oh yeah, oh my God, yes, that one. Right? Task initiation is the ability to actually start something, even when you know exactly what to do, even when you know it's important, that it needs to happen, right? Even when it's even something easy, like phoning the doctor to make an appointment, okay? It often looks like sitting down to do something and just not doing it, whether that's staring at the screen or grabbing your phone and scrolling on Instagram. The task sits there. You sit there. You know what you need to do. You want to do it and nothing happens. Okay? It's not laziness. It's not avoidance. Well, no, to be fair, sometimes it is avoidance, but that's a whole nother episode, okay? But it is a genuine, like, neurological difficulty, which the brain kind of sees a danger or a fire signal, and it just doesn't start. Okay? So I mentioned this before, the ADHD brain often needs interest, challenge, urgency, or novelty to activate because that helps us to produce the dopamine we need. Okay? Which this is also why we're brilliant in a crisis, like absolutely brilliant, right? In a crisis situation, when shit hits the fan, we're brilliant, but we're terrible at admin. Right? So number 6, the sixth and final executive function that doesn't always function for us is time management. Okay, aka time blindness. This one. Ooh, this one. If you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you know this one. You know I talk about this one and my own experiences of this quite a bit. So ADHD brains often experience time very differently. And it was, I think, Dr. Russell Barkley again, and he's the author of, oh gosh, here we go. My working memory is being challenged. No, I've lost it. I'll come back to it. It's a great book. Again, I've talked about it before, but I'll come back to it. He, I think, coined the phrase time blindness, which is where people with ADHD have this difficulty in perceiving time and like feeling the passing of time and being able to estimate time and manage time accurately, right? For most people, that time exists in this sort of continuous, present to future sort of a way, and they can plan and have a feel for it. But for those of us with ADHD, time tends to exist in one of two categories. It's either now or it's not now. And not now can mean 5 minutes, or it can mean 3 weeks, or 6 months from now. It all sort of feels the same to us until all of a sudden the deadline is like now, today. Okay? So what this could look like in real life is constantly underestimating how long things will take. Losing track of time completely when you are absorbed in something, right? Deadlines just appearing out of nowhere, even though they were in your calendar for months. Being late even when you genuinely tried not to be, okay? It's not that you're disrespecting time like yours or somebody else's. It's that your brain literally cannot feel the passing of time in the same way as other people. Okay. Then, my friends, we need to talk about the emotional side. Okay. So I want to spend a minute here because I think that this is the piece that too often gets left out of the general conversations around ADHD. And this is a piece that causes some of the deepest suffering for those of us with ADHD. Okay. ADHD is not just an attention issue. It is deeply, significantly, and incredibly an emotional condition for us. Okay, we know ADHD brains feel things more intensely. The volume dial on our emotions is turned up higher Joy is louder, it's bigger. Excitement is huge for us. Frustration, rejection, disappointment, shame are also really loud for us, really, really huge, really big. Okay? And then there's something called RSD, rejection sensitive dysphoria. Now, that's the experience of having a really intense physical reaction to real or perceived feelings of being rejected or criticized or having failed. And I say perceived because sometimes it's not that we have necessarily been criticized or rejected. It's the fact that we feel like we could be. Okay? So a really good example of that is when you're waiting for a text message reply and it takes, you see that person has read the message and it's like a whole day later and they still haven't replied and suddenly you're spiraling, right? An off-tone email from a colleague has you convinced that they hate you. A message from your boss says, hey, can we talk at 3 p.m.? You're convinced that you're going to get fired, right? When you get feedback, sometimes your brain thinks that you're an absolute failure and a total fuck up, okay? So emotional regulation, again, this is one of our executive functions, but I didn't include it there because I wanted to talk about it separately. But emotional regulation is the ability to manage how you respond to your emotions. And, it's the ability to calm yourself down, right? To turn down the volume on the emotions. This is huge for us with ADHD. It is genuinely affects all areas of our life. It's not drama. It is neurology. It's the way in which our brains are wired. Okay? Again, it's like we have this emotional volume control and ours is turned up way higher than everybody else's. And when you try to find the remote to turn it down, the remote doesn't always work. Or you can't find the remote. Okay? Next up, let's talk a little bit about consistency, because this is one that confuses so many of us. Because I think this is also one that can keep people from getting diagnosed, okay, from believing in your own diagnosis as well. Because some days you might be incredible. You're on fire. You get shit done. You feel clear. You're in the zone. And other days, brushing your teeth literally feels like a mountain that you have to climb. It feels impossible. And people, right, including sometimes ourselves, look at the good days and they say, well, clearly you can do it when you want to do it. Oh, I hate that, right? Because here's the reframe. I want you to hear this. It's not inconsistent effort. It's not inconsistent ability. It's inconsistent access. Okay? Your brain's ability to access its own resources when you need to access focus and motivation and emotional regulation and all of those executive functions. That is what's not consistent. Okay? You've got some random access that you just cannot figure out. So you're not choosing to have an off day. You just can't access the tools in your brain, the things in your brain that you need. Okay? My friend. Actually, that word access takes me back for a second because I spent years not having access, not knowing why some days everything flowed and I felt like I was on top of the world, and then other days I couldn't do the basic things like wash my hair or brush my teeth, no matter how hard I tried. So I think about this moment I had when I was 28 years old and I was living in London at the time, and I went to the doctor and I wasn't looking for anything life-changing. I was literally just there to ask for weight loss pills. I was convinced if I could just lose all this excess weight I'd put on, then finally I would be happy, I would feel better. And instead of prescribing me the pills, she said, I'm going to prescribe you these life coaching sessions. I remember thinking, what the fuck? That's not what I asked for. But anyway, I knew I had nothing to lose. I went along. And that was the first time in my life that someone helped me understand why I was doing what I was doing, right? Not what I needed to do differently. I knew what I needed to do, but why I was doing what I was doing and why I couldn't get myself to, do the things I knew I needed to do, right? It was the underneath. It was huge because something in me shifted, something very real, okay? I got certified as a life coach the year after that. And I never went back to get the weight loss pills. I lost all of that weight naturally with this newfound awareness, with this, awareness of my brain and how it worked. I built a business. I, left the typical 9-to-5 sort of life. I built my own business. And then years later, after coaching for years, I got my own ADHD diagnosis. At age 36, I finally get diagnosed. And for the second time in my life, everything clicked in this way like I hadn't expected. It was like the missing piece. And I realized then what coaching had been doing for me, right? How it had helped me, and combined that with actually understanding how the ADHD brain worked and understanding what ADHD is. That right there is what I want to give people, that combination, because nobody gave that to me. I had to go find all of these pieces separately over the years through a lot of trial and a lot of error, my friend. So that's why I built Adulting with ADHD. Okay. And I do want to mention that this week I have opened it up at a sale price. So inside you have everything I wish I had had, right? Understanding your ADHD brain, how to regulate your emotions, like how to do that. I wish we had been taught this in schools, how to regulate your emotions. I teach you that inside. How to navigate and overcome burnout, how to work through procrastination, how to navigate RSD, how to increase your own dopamine naturally, how to coach yourself. 10 courses and workshops, monthly group coaching with me. There's workbooks if you prefer the written way, right? It's a whole thing, my friends. And right now it is only 388 New Zealand dollars, okay, until the 23rd of May. That is half the usual price. The link, I'm going to drop it for you in the show notes right here, okay? Now, let's get back to busting some myths. We need to address a few myths that we hear about ADHD. Okay? ADHD is just laziness. That's one that really pisses me off, and I'm sure it fires you up too, my friend. Right? Laziness doesn't explain why someone can hyper-focus for 6 hours on something they love. All right? ADHD is not laziness. It is having a brain that is wired very differently. The second myth, you just need more discipline. Guess what? Discipline is an executive function. You can't discipline your way out of executive function deficit. It's impossible. Okay? The third one, you would do it if you really cared. Ooh, that one's like a stab in the chest. The people who struggle the most with ADHD are the people who care the most. Right? I know that, and you know that. Right? I coach them. I work with them every single day. The problem isn't caring. The problem is that bridge between caring and being able to do. The fourth myth, it's just a distraction. Everybody gets distracted. Yes, true. Everybody does get distracted sometimes, right? But ADHD is in the nervous system at a level at which distraction operates differently every single day and across every single area of your life. All right? I sometimes say to people, everybody pees, but if you peed 50 times a day, you might want to get it checked out, right? Everybody does experience many of the ADHD symptoms, like getting distracted, procrastinating, having difficulty starting a task, or forgetting what they were saying mid-sentence. Yes. But are you doing that to such an extent that it is having a negative impact on your life? That it's having a negative impact on the things that you want to do or achieve, right? If it were just about trying harder, don't you think we probably would have fixed it and solved it all by now? If we had $1 for every time they said that. Right, I want to touch real briefly on strengths because I think we all just need this little reminder, okay? And I'm not going to go on and on here because I know some of you are a bit allergic to the whole ADHD as a superpower narrative. That's okay. I get that totally. Some days it definitely does not feel like a superpower. Some days just feel hard, okay? But I want to say the same brain that makes some things really difficult is also the brain that thinks in ways that other brains just can't think. Right? Creativity, pattern recognition, big picture thinking, hyper empathy, our ability to empathize with people, right? The ability to hyper focus on something you love and produce extraordinary work. the ability to thrive in chaos, to make connections that no one else can see, to be the most energizing person in a room when you are aligned. Some of the most brilliant, creative, world-changing people have ADHD. Not because ADHD made everything easy, but because their differently wired brain saw things differently. Okay? So, my friend, after all of that, what do I want you to take away from this episode? I want you to take away the understanding that ADHD isn't about giving yourself an excuse. It's not about labeling yourself and just leaving it there. It's about finally having an explanation and the right instruction manual for the brain that you actually have. Think about it this way. If you had been given a smartphone, just a random smartphone, okay, and somebody handed you a manual for a completely different device, and then you spent years convinced you were doing it wrong, convinced there was something fundamentally wrong with you and broken about you, convinced everybody else had it figured out because they were able to use their smartphone perfectly, and you were the only one struggling, right? You were not doing it wrong. You just had the wrong manual, and now you get the right one, my friend. Okay? So here's what I want you to take away from today, if nothing else. There is nothing wrong with you. Okay? There is nothing wrong with you. You simply have a brain that works differently. Okay? And personally, I'm obsessed with that brain. I love that brain. ADHDers are my favorite people. So I'm so glad you're here with us. I'm so glad you're listening to this podcast. Okay? Now, one more thing before you go. I mentioned Adulting with ADHD earlier. Okay, the ADHD program I have, the sale closes on the 23rd of May. You can head to navigatingadultadhd.com/AWA. I'm also going to put that in the show notes. Okay, huge, huge love to you, my friend. Take care. I'll speak to you next week. Hey friend, if you want some more help navigating and thriving with ADHD and some help applying everything that you're learning here on the podcast, then head over to our website, navigatingadultadhd.com.